Problem with Killer Mike is that he's a capitalist. So FD Signifier, super talented creator, typically does political and hip-hop related content, dropped a video called The Problem with Killer Mike. And I'm pretty sure it's about his capitalist tendencies. But yeah, let's dive into this and see what's actually going on here. I'm Sean Longevity with Bringing Down the Band and the New Old Heads podcast, and this is my Unpack series where I typically go deeper on New Old Heads segments, but today we're going to watch this FD Signifier video. So let's go.
Killer Mike is a hip-hop legend, one of the greatest to ever hold your favorite rapper's favorite rapper title, and one of the most influential names and voices among black celebrities when it comes to political thought. Sadly, that's not the highest praise in the world, where rap legends are tap dancing for Donald Trump. If you only hear Mike's music, you think he was on some Fred Hampton shit. His first ever splash on the political scene was interviewing Bernie Sanders during the 2016 election cycle. Mike was also one of the first mainstream rappers to criticize Barack Obama back around the same time. His song Reagan is probably one of the most provocative political rap songs ever. And
Reagan is my favorite political rap song ever.
Work with LP on Run the Jewels is the closest thing we've had to.
Shouts to DJ Trackstar in there. He's going to be headlining the Trees Festival here on August 23rd here in Indianapolis on the stage that we're putting together.
Radical hip hop in the mainstream since, Dead Prez back in the early 2000s, or Public Enemy in the 80s and 90s. You hear songs like Kill Your Masters and you see him chew and Whitlock in public, and you feel like Mike is as left as mainstream public celebs tend to get, and that's probably true.
It is actually probably true. Because most public celebrities are not left really much at all. They're just kind of they're on the liberal fringes.
But then you see he interviewed Herschel Walker here in Georgia back when Herschel was on that incredibly embarrassing run for Senate. In fact, if you're here locally in Georgia, you know that Mike's radically inclined veneer kind of tarnishes itself a little bit. He's met a few times with Republican Governor Brian Kemp. He was silent during the anti-Cop City movement. And when the uprisings were happening in 2020, he, along with T.I., was one of the folks they trotted out hoping to convince people to get out of the streets and not tear up their property. Now, while I have issues with a lot of that stuff that I've talked about in other videos, as mainstream rappers go, Killer Mike might as well be Tupac. And not really since Tupac had a rap.
Yeah, but Killer Mike is not mainstream. I know he won a Grammy, but calling him mainstream would be inappropriate.
Have been capable of speaking to social issues outside of their music as effectively as in their music, something that even the most socially conscious rappers today are not able to do. But quiet as it's kept, Tupac was, along with being a theater kid, truly engaged with a radical legacy. He was legit raised by Black Panthers. And Killer Mike's parents.
Killer Mike was not. It was like his mom was a cop, or his mom was wasn't his mom like a drug dealer or something? His dad was a cop?
Were the unlikely combination of a police officer and a business owner / part-time drug trafficker, which really explains a lot about Mike if you pay attention, right?
It really kind of does, because he seems like he's always kind of pulled in both worlds in a constant basis.
I want to be clear, since I might fuck around and run into this dude one of these days. I have criticism for Mike, but no smoke for him. This is not a call out video. This is meant to be a critique, to look at Mike's political past and things he's presented and say, okay, what here is useful and what here not so much. And the main issue I have with Mike is his undying love for capitalism.
There we go. And that's my main issue with him as well. And I love Mike. I love his music. I thought Michael was an amazing album, even though, he definitely had some capitalist bars on there that I thought was a little weird, but overall, amazing album. Really great album.
Mike genuinely loves and believes in capitalism and the myth that black wealth and black buying power is the key to black liberation. So much so that he's been a part of numerous endeavors, both locally and nationally, designed to uplift black people through entrepreneurship and wealth accumulation. And folks have tried to explain to Mike that this is illogical, and he seemingly has just dug in harder around this. He even a few years back had a contentious exchange with Dr. Jared Ball, the author of The Myth of Black Buying Power, a book I've talked about more than a few times on this channel, and a book that every so-called black capitalist should read.
I feel like in the society that we're in, to be able to balance this idea of leftism that we would love to see versus the actual reality of what we actually are living in, that the ideas that Mike kind of puts out there, even the Bernie Sanders ideas of the democratic socialism in that particular type of way, I feel like those are that's the bridge to get a little bit closer to the left-hand side. I feel like if you just jump directly into the leftism, then that's when we've seen historically a lot of problems happen. around in the world, just because of the conflict that comes with it. And I would argue that Mike is, even though I do disagree with a lot of what he does, I feel like he's one of those people that is bridging the gap in the same type of way that like Hassan Piker isn't like this super leftist. I mean, he's super leftist, but he's not like this super theory nerd, right? But he does a really good job of bringing people over to see the left-hand side so that people can go a little bit deeper and read a little bit more. I feel like Mike does that in his own type of way, while also kind of appealing to capitalism and people that capitalists or people that want to be capitalists, because let's be real, most people aren't capitalists. They don't have the capital to be capitalists, but I feel like he does a good job of speaking to those people that believe that myth. And so, I don't know, that's what I'd say there.
Something that Mike probably has not read, but it didn't stop him from sneak dissing Dr. Ball on a Breakfast Club interview a while back.
The myth of the black economic spending power, I'm not arguing that with niggas, man. Shouts out your book, my nigga. You know what I'm talking about. And you want me on your show, and I'm never gonna go, right? But there you go, nigga. That makes you happy I mentioned you.
Mike's love of capitalism and flawed radicalism was never more apparent than in his short-lived Netflix series, Trigger Warning. This was a 6-episode miniseries where Killer Mike tried to get himself over as the foremost progressive and radical political thinker in mainstream media. And it almost worked. And if I'm fair, there's some legitimately good stuff in here. But at the same time, because it's a Netflix show and not an actual radical movement, it very much devolves into lightly scripted reality TV hijinks where you can tell producers are behind the scenes encouraging certain behavior or setting up certain scenarios to give it the veneer of reality TV and radical activity. But the truth is, it was just entertainment. And this is no more apparent than the first and last episodes, which to me represent the core of Killer Mike's flawed politics. In the first episode, Killer Mike decides to spend 3 days where he doesn't spend a single dollar in the black community. And it's really the most frustrating of all the episodes in retrospect, because if anything, it illustrates the folly of black capitalism in this episode alone.
I want to know how difficult it is to truly live in the black economy. So for the next 3 days, leading up to my show in Athens, Georgia, I'm living totally black.
Mike quickly.
This is the same type of argument that I have on a regular basis on the New Old Heads, where, you know, sometimes the argument will be brought up about Jay-Z being, you know, like he's an inspiration and all this stuff. You know, he's a billionaire. He's inspiring people to become billionaires. And then I say, nobody should be a billionaire, even if you're black. It doesn't matter, you know, yeah. Anyways,
it runs into the limitations of the whole black buying power myth and the idea that black people have $2 trillion to spend and that somehow this spending will create black wealth that will be the key to black liberation. Which is that niggas don't own enough of our economic realities to ever create a situation where our buying power could move the needle on our plight in America. By the time Mike was trying to find somewhere to sleep and eat, he was in dire straits, sleeping on a park bench while out of town and not having eaten anything because the black restaurants he went to weren't actually using food bought from black vendors.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, sir.
Please tell me like this came from the West Georgia, like Black Farmers Collaborative or...
No, it didn't.
May I get a to-go box, please?
Most of those restaurants use the same vendors that any white restaurant does, which means that at some point in time, a white person is getting paid. In the end, he finally ate in a small town in Georgia when he found a black farm that also had its own soul food restaurant. And understand, because we'll come to this later.
For Mike's defense, it's still funneling money into a certain sect of black businesses. Right. It's just that the top end always goes to the very corporatized rich. And you know, I would argue, I mean, obviously there's an intersectionality between, you know, classism and racism, but I would argue that, you know, it's really the wealthy versus the poor. It's just that there's an added element of racism that exists here in the United States of America, but it's always going to funnel to the top. And that's typically really wealthy white people.
That's a really cool and good thing to have that type of self-sustained food source, but that's not what many black capitalists invest their money into, because that's not going to make people more money. More on this later, by the way. At the end of the episode, instead of reflecting on what he should have learned, which is the limits of the very concept he's built his ideology around, at his concert, he takes a moment to speak to the audience and says, we're going to make Black Friday every Friday. And every Friday, you're going to buy something from a black business, completely forgetting the fact that he learned himself that those black businesses at some point in time are going to be buying from white vendors, paying for utilities and materials from white businesses. And if they're lucky, eventually putting the money they make from that situation in a white bank. And right now you might be saying, well, FD, don't you know about the Greenwood Bank that Killer Mike started a couple of years ago?
I was on the waiting list years ago, but then I I went elsewhere.
Black-owned bank that endeavors to help circulate the black dollar among black businesses and provide financial services to black people the same way these services are offered to white entrepreneurs. And that if we can replicate this, we can eventually get free and lead to economic and liberatory prosperity for black people all over the country. And my response to you is, you must not watch my videos. When you finish this, you should go watch my video on the real black conservatism, but I'm gonna kind of rehash the whole of that here. So if you don't want to give me an extra view and help, pay bills around here, just pay attention for a little while longer. Plus, there's important stuff coming at the end. So
if you get the time, go watch that video. It's a really good video.
Just stay here. All right, stay here. So yes, 𝗕𝗥𝗓𝗡, along with a couple of other black entrepreneurs of relative note, started the Greenwood Bank, I think in 2022. And they marketed it as a black-owned bank and named.
But they were pushing it before that. I think they were pushing it, 2 or 3 years before that? I think. So I was on the waiting list for like 3 years.
After the historic community,
maybe 2 years.
Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, also known as Black Wall Street, before it was burned down in a horrific act of racial violence in 1921. And it's ironic, or maybe perfectly coincidental, that both Mike's alleged bank and the story of Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, both involve a lot of stretching of the truth or hiding of reality to maintain the black capitalist mythology. Before I continue, a lot of this next piece is due to the scholarship of 𝗕𝗥𝗡𝗚𝗓 and the Black Myths podcast. I've talked to 𝗕𝗥𝗡𝗚𝗓 a couple of
Shouts to 𝗕𝗥𝗡𝗚𝗓. I know 𝗕𝗥𝗡𝗚𝗓. He Yeah, I do 𝗕𝗥𝗡𝗚𝗓. That's cool.
Times and content, including an interview on my podcast channel. I'll leave his podcast on this topic, complete with sources, in the description. But in short, Greenwood was in fact a very wealthy and very vibrant black neighborhood during its time. But like most forms of black wealth, that wealth was a byproduct of a client economy to white businesses. In this case, the very lucrative oil businesses that erupted in Tulsa at the turn of the century when they first discovered oil in like 1910. The discovery of that oil created an opportunity for many entrepreneurs to set up shop, and some of those entrepreneurs were definitely black, and that did lead to a lot of black wealth accumulation for a portion of black residents in Tulsa. But it was never a universally wealthy reality for all of them. And that wealth was not only generated and circulated amongst black hands. Most
Capitalism.
So the black residents of Tulsa were still laborers working for white businesses. As amazing and celebratory as we should be of Tulsa and the Greenwood district, the idea that Tulsa was a self-sustained, all-black economic utopia is just not true. Again, this is not to say that Greenwood wasn't amazing and worthy of that celebration, but the myths of that city are constantly used for nefarious means. What is definitely true is that Greenwood was burned down by white terrorists in 1921, killing somewhere between 50 and 500 black people and burning down probably thousands of businesses and houses. And this is such a shameful American event that is left out of even the most progressive history books that you might have read even back in my day. In fact, if you didn't have a certain type of uncle that may have worn a certain type of hat, you probably never heard this story until Lovecraft Country or The Watchmen talked about it in.
Yeah, I was just about to mention, go watch The Watchmen, because they tell the story a little bit, kind of.
Their shows a couple of years ago. However, even your Hotep uncle probably doesn't tell you the next part, which is usually left out to allow the story of the Tulsa massacre to be utilized as a weapon of black capitalist propaganda the way Killer Mike did. Greenwood was eventually rebuilt. The black folks who survived the riot, which were plenty, had insurance, and more important, they came together as a community to rebuild Greenwood. It's how many of them were able to write memoirs about it. They didn't just let the earth get salted and then move on. Greenwood ended up thriving even more decades later after it was rebuilt. What is not said is that what eventually destroyed Greenwood, the reason why it doesn't exist today, was government policy. It was city planning or urban renewal ushered in by then President Dwight Eisenhower that destroyed the town for good by building highways through the neighborhood. I even found this, hopefully I'm not stealing somebody's work, but I couldn't find anyone else and I couldn't figure out who it was. But I got this off Facebook, and it's a really cool graphic just showing you where the Greenwood community used to be and how the highway pretty much erased it. So
yeah, I did not know that. So that's definitely, I mean, I knew about all the other stuff, but I definitely didn't know about, I didn't know about the city being rebuilt. I actually did not know about that. So that's good information.
Horrifying as that act of white terrorism was, that wasn't what stopped the movement. It was political decree. And this is the folly of believing that you will be safe enough if you get enough money, that enough money from black people will produce power that will stop this country from doing whatever the hell it wants to us. That black success by itself is a form of resistance. Until all of us are free, until the system no longer has power over us, we will always be subject to this tyranny. The story.
And then you just create another system. And the system is just ran by people that look a little bit more familiar, you know? It's
of Greenwood is often used to inspire black people, but also shame them with this idea that if we just stopped smoking so much weed and wasting our money on malt liquor and acrylic nails, that we'll be able to build Black Wall Street again and make everything good in the hood. That all it takes is buying black and investing in black entrepreneurship to get freedom, but that's not reality. Everybody can't.
And it's also not freedom. Like, that's not what freedom is.
Some people have to have a job. Yet that was the undertone of Mike's Greenwood Bank commercials, which was marketed as a black-owned bank, but in reality was a financial services app that on the back connected its users to a white-owned bank, Coastal Community Banking Solutions. And I want to be very clear, although that is incredibly deceptive marketing, in isolation, this is not the worst thing ever. Pretty much all of us are connected to some banking institution, and pretty much all of these banking institutions are fundamentally evil.
Yeah, you can't get away from it. Like, I like my bank, but I left some of the major banking systems, but you still, we exist in capitalism. We exist in America. Like, we have to have something. So
it makes sense to use the one that's owned by somebody black that might provide better, more curated financial services to its black customer base. I am not saying take your money out of Greenwood or that it's a scam or anything like that. I'm just pointing out the manipulation in the marketing and what ideas it plays around with, and reminding you that your financial services are not part of the revolution. They are not contributing to liberation. They're only contributing to your financial situation, and that situation is not radical. And that's kind of the thing with Mike. He loves capitalism, but I personally think that he does genuinely want liberation for black people. But he loves capitalism too much to recognize that those two things do not work together. But he keeps trying to fuse them shits together anyway. It's like one of those fucked up fusions from Dragon Ball Z where everything's off, but you still get this weird homunculus. Or maybe a better example is, the dog girl from Full Metal Alchemist. I'm sure everybody's happy I brought that up. And because of this habit of mutilating these philosophies to make sure that they can still fit within the framework of capitalism, he bastardizes actual black radical thinking and philosophy, philosophers who would outright tell him to his face that his goal of using capitalism to liberate black people is a fool's errand. As a literally day one Killer Mike fan, not just from his first big hit Action when he was still under Outkast in the early 2000s, I'm talking about his legendary independent run of the late 2000s when he was your favorite rapper's favorite rapper. I Pledge Allegiance to the Grind, 1, 2, and 3, all classics. I'm talking Ric Flair Killer Mike. Y'all not up on that. In that era, I heard him on several occasions shout out the likes of Malcolm X, George Jackson, and Fred Hampton. And again, he is the first black figure to bring democratic socialism to the community through Bernie Sanders, as flawed as that was. So there's a there, but that
you can say it's flawed. And I'm not a Bernie bro by any means, but like, in our current political climate, that's the best that we can ask for right now. So I understand why he was pushing for that.
Also tells you that he should know better, that either he's too protective of his own class position or too stubborn to recognize the inherent paradox he's presenting to black people. And because videos like this are far less popular than a Breakfast Club interview, black people who are 60, 70 years deep in a brainwashing campaign around our own history are unable to see the internal paradoxes in what Killer Mike tends to say, so he ends up getting a pass on it. There's inherent value in Mike's ability to galvanize and inspire black people, but it's frustrating to know how he's so close to pushing a more useful politic, but instead mostly ends up distorting what those politics look like.
Yeah, my perspective on this, more from a political standpoint, is just, I feel like we need those voices that are going to bring people a little bit closer. One thing that I can speak on from experience is even me talking to people that are a little less politically affiliated, or not affiliated, but they're not as entrenched and pay attention to the politics as much as I do. Killer Mike has been, and the stuff that he has done has been a bridge for a lot of people to at least start paying a little bit of attention. And I think sometimes we don't put enough importance, or we don't give that the credit that it maybe deserves potentially. And I honestly just feel like that's his role, but I do wish there was like a pipeline from, like, to me, Killer Mike is an integral part for people to get more learned to some degree, because I feel like if you're a capitalist, it's a long ways to get over to become a leftist. It's a long ways to get over there, and you need points in between. And I feel like Killer Mike is a pivotal point for a lot of growth for a lot of people. I just wish that there was a better pipeline from Killer Mike to the next thing. So I don't know.
And the perfect final example of this is in the last episode of that same show, where as a season finale, they decide to take the real work being done by the community he visited in the first episode and turn it into a farcical, nonsensical episode of Survivor. Many of the people that he connects with over the course of the show come back, and he creates New Africa by buying some farmland outside of Atlanta and inviting pretty much any old body to it. We have action.
I've wondered many times, like, what happened to New Africa. Maybe I'll look it up. Forget how he spelled it. New Africa. I put NU because I was trying to be clever. Did Killer Mike's New Africa survive? No mention. Oh, okay. Still running. We opened a bank last year, Greenwood. We built a mini apartment complex. Tweaked the rules a little bit. I actually have an election coming up the day after your counties. Come to our sleep service. Smoke something. What the fuck is... Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah, I don't know what that is or if that's a bot, but... Killer Mike rigged the votes in New Africa's first election. Anyways, get back to this.
Actual activists joined by juggalos and other random people that clearly weren't on one accord when they got there and surely aren't still there today. And I don't have a problem with any particular groups of people he invited. I hope everybody finds their space. I've heard that juggalos are like one of the most progressive rap fandoms in existence right now. But this is very much a farce of a community with no real political agenda, no unifying goals, or no sense of sustainability. If anything, the episode makes the very idea of a land project seem silly, and that's really bad. Like, they even sell sponsorship spots on their flag. Now again, Killer Mike is a rapper. He is not a political philosopher. He is not a politician. And this is a Netflix show, and you should kind of know what you're getting. So it's not a huge surprise that they would take this really important, serious thing that the Black radical tradition has done over the years and water it down into a farce. And for all the criticisms I have of Mike, I can't give up on the possibility that there's value in his work and potential in his words if we could just get them to be less fetishizing of capitalism in general. And I'm sure that for some, hearing that song Reagan or hearing Killer Mike even mention some of these luminaries was a way for them to discover these politics in earnest and maybe, just maybe, start them on a journey of real political awakening. And more than anything, to me, it's always important to keep in mind that when we critique celebrities and artists, etc., the goal isn't to destroy them or make it seem like their art is not of any value or that you shouldn't enjoy it, especially when it's of high quality. The goal is to use the light that they naturally bring to any situation and shine it on things that are valuable and important, even as you're criticizing them. And with that in mind, I want to talk about today's sponsor, which is not something I'm getting paid for, but something I want to bring to everyone's attention because it's something I think is valuable and important, especially in this month of August, which is also known in the Black radical tradition as Black August. What if Killer Mike were more serious about a land project for the people? What if instead of fun and hijinks, there was a land project in Atlanta helmed by a former Black Panther and political prisoner that is really trying to build power apart from the system, and they needed your help to do this? In the past, on other channels or social media posts, you may have seen me promote the work of community movement builders here in Atlanta. I talked to one of their leaders, 𝗕𝗥𝗓𝗡 Franklin, about the Stop Cop City movement a couple of years back. They were very active in one of the leading organizations in that movement, and they recently reached out to me about their Love, Land, and Liberation project with the goal of showing how a collective can use land for something useful, not to start a weird episode of Survivor, but to continue the Black radical tradition. In observance of Black August, which is a month of resistance, fasting, and education meant to engage with the plight of political prisoners across the globe, Community Movement Builders is doing a funding drive for this project, and I want you, and maybe even Killer Mike if he sees this, right? You can make it right, Mike, to support this project. They acquired 14 acres of land 20 minutes outside of Atlanta, and it's already being developed as a space for food production, movement retreats, and training. Models of food sustainability are already being achieved on the land after just 9 months because of their survival programs and education. That food is distributed to the local community and those who participate in harvesting the food. Newly planned animal husbandry projects are already beginning to bear fruit, or should we say eggs. As I said earlier, the land is a home of a former Panther, BLA member, and political prisoner, and hosts retreats of the Jericho movement on how to free political prisoners across the country. As opposed to mocking Black land projects, Killer Mike and others, those of you watching, should take a careful look at what it takes to keep a community alive during a time where all of us need to be thinking about where we might need to go, considering how things are going in this country.
Shouts to FD. That was a good video. Yeah, I think the last thing I'll say is I agree with almost everything that FD is saying here. The only pushback that I would have at all is, and he kind of came to it at the end where he was kind of saying, there might be spaces for it, but I think there's just bridges sometimes. There's people it takes a while to unpack indoctrination, no matter what type of indoctrination it is. And it's a process, right? It's not an endpoint. It's a continual process. It's a learning process. I'm an educator, like everything is a process. And, I feel like Killer Mike does his job really well, but the criticisms that FD has of him, I would agree. But I would say that probably Killer Mike has a net positive in general for what he does, just for the de-education to some degree. You know, like it's hard to get a grown ass person completely change their political ideology. You know, especially if they going from a Jay-Z to a Killer Mike is, you know, that is a step, even though it seems small, you know, and I think there's place for it, I guess, is all that I'm saying. So, but yeah, this is a real good video. Make sure you follow and subscribe and turn on the notifications. FD also has a Nebula thing, so go check out his channel, do all that stuff with him. And yeah, I'm Sean, Longevity. You know, I'm a part of the New Old Heads podcast. You know, if you want to support our show, it's newoldheads.com or patreon.com/newoldheads. You can become a free member to get notifications of stuff, and then become a $5 member to become, you know, get our uncut 2-hour show every week that drops Thursday, but you get it a day early on Wednesday if you become a member. All right. Till next time. Peace.